The sky over Eltravia burned orange as the twin suns collided with the clouds of smoke and fire. Across the palace walls, sirens screamed and alien banners fell as warships blasted through the atmosphere. Princess Nizara stood still, her golden armor scorched and cracked, holding the ceremonial blade of her ancestors in one trembling hand. She had been trained to face warlords, not watch her empire collapse from within. The Galactic Federation had promised peace, but the alliances broke the moment she refused to choose a suitor from the long list of alien noblemen. Her refusal, seen as rebellion, gave her enemies the excuse to strike. Now her own people watched silently as her kingdom shattered under fire. Not a single male from the known systems had accepted her offer. Some mocked her for being too proud. Others feared her bloodline, which held dormant psionic powers. A few whispered lies that she was cursed, too strong, or too dangerous to bear offspring. One by one, they turned away. Now the empire that rejected her choice was paying the price in flames. As she stumbled down the palace steps, guards pulled her aside and forced her into the underground escape route. She resisted. She wanted to die with her people, with honor. But they shouted something about survival, about the last hope of Eltravia, words that meant nothing to her now. The transport pod sealed with a hiss. It shot into the sky like a silver arrow and blinked out of radar range. No coordinates were given. Even the guards didn't know where it would land. They only told the ship's AI to take her somewhere safe, somewhere no Federation lord would dare look. The pod spiraled through space, dodging patrols and broken satellites, entering a forbidden sector labeled Deathworld 52. The AI picked up only one living biosignature on the entire planet. It was not Eltravan. It was not Federation. It was human. Jason worked alone in the rocky valley, scavenging spare tech from crashed satellites. He liked silence, especially after what happened during the galactic uprising. He didn't miss the noise, or the commands, or the empty metals. He just wanted peace, a quiet place where no one cared about war. When the alien pod slammed into the cliffs near his camp, his first thought was to run. Deathworlds didn't get visitors. Whatever was in there was trouble. But something gnawed at his gut. He checked his weapon, grabbed a medpack and moved forward with caution. He didn't expect what he saw. A tall, elegant alien woman covered in soot, barely conscious, armor cracked, hair matted with blood. She looked up at him through half-lidded eyes and whispered one word. "Kill?" Jason raised an eyebrow and shook his head. He knelt and checked her vitals, strong heart rate, internal injuries, signs of battle trauma. He didn't know her language, but he knew pain when he saw it. Without another thought, he lifted her gently and carried her back to the shelter built into the canyon wall. The alien stirred as he placed her on the medbed. She tried to stand, reaching for her blade. Jason gently pushed her back and motioned her to rest. She blinked, confused. No one had ever touched her like that, not with pity or command, but with calm determination. He worked in silence, cleaning her wounds, resetting a cracked bone, applying man-hostage to her side. The alien flinched at first, but slowly stopped resisting. She watched his hands move with precision, his eyes scanning every detail, not once looking at her like she was an object or prize. For the first time in her life, Nizara felt small. Not weak but seen. This human, this scruffy man with rough hands and no title, hadn't asked her name or her rank. He just acted. She realized with growing shock that he had no idea who she was, and that fact made her heart beat faster. Jason handed her a bowl of soup. It wasn't much, just protein broth with roots he found in the wild. She looked at it like it was a royal offering. He waited as she tasted it and gave the smallest nod of approval. Then, for the first time, she spoke her name, Nizara. She said. Jason pointed to himself and replied, "Jason." No salute. No bow. Just names, equal, simple. She stared at him for a moment longer before whispering something in her native tongue. He didn't understand the words, but the way she said them made him pause. The war outside had taken her crown, her people, her power. But sitting beside this strange human in a metal shelter carved into stone, something inside her stirred, something far more dangerous than any weapon she had ever wielded. It was hope. Jason sat across from her, watching as she slowly sipped the warm broth he had prepared. The crackling of the fire between them was the only sound in the room. He didn't ask questions. He never did. He believed people talked when they were ready. Nezara looked at him through tired eyes. Her body ached from the injuries, but her mind was more unsettled. This man showed no fear, no greed, no hunger for status. In her world, kindness always came with a cost. But here, in this dusty metal shelter, she only received silence and soup. She studied his hands as he worked on a broken drone near the fire. His fingers moved with skill, not speed. There was focus in every turn of the tool, but no rush. He did not try to impress her. He did not even glance to see if she was watching. A memory struck her like a spear. In her youth, suitors boasted about their ships, muscles, bloodlines. None listened. None cared who she really was. But this human, he hadn't even asked her title. That made her chest tighten in a strange and unfamiliar way. Jason suddenly stood and walked outside without a word. The cold wind rushed in as the door slid open. Nezara flinched, unsure whether to follow or stay hidden. Her instincts screamed to stay low, but her heart pushed her legs forward. She stepped outside slowly. The sky above was filled with stars that looked closer than ever. The air was sharp but clean. Jason stood on a rock, looking out into the valley, holding a small scanner in one hand. His expression was calm, but his eyes were alert. "There's movement out there," he said without turning. "Could be scavengers. Could be worse." His voice was rough but steady. Nezara looked where he pointed and saw faint flashes in the darkness. The Federation had found her. Her breath caught in her throat. She turned to Jason, expecting panic or fear. But he only nodded and said, "Time to move." He tossed her a cloak. She caught it and wrapped it around herself without hesitation. There was no need for words now. Just action. The two moved quickly through the narrow trails between the cliffs. Jason led the way, his steps quiet but fast. Nezara kept closer, senses sharp. She noticed how well he moved on this rough world. It was clear he belonged to this terrain, not to cities or royal halls. They reached a hidden cave behind a wall of rocks. Jason ducked inside and helped her through. The cave was narrow but deep, shielded from scanners. Inside, old crates, tools, and energy cells were stacked along the walls. This wasn't a hiding place. This was preparation. "Do you live like this always?" she finally asked, her voice barely louder than the wind. Jason shrugged and sat down against the cave wall. "It's better than being told what to do by someone who's never seen a battlefield," he answered. Nezara looked at him carefully. He didn't know he was speaking to a princess, a commander, a bloodline with ancient power. Or maybe he did, and didn't care. That made her pulse race even more. She sat beside him, not out of weakness but by choice. In that silence she felt the distance between their worlds shrink. He was not like the others, not bred to impress or conquer. He was real. That word real had never meant much to her until now. She turned to him and asked softly, "Why did you help me?" Jason didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "You needed help. That's enough." It was such a simple answer that it left her stunned. No reward, no politics. Just one soul recognizing another in need. That night, she could not sleep. She lay awake beside the small fire in the cave, watching his face as he slept. His breathing was slow, steady, peaceful. She had seen so many men in her life, powerful ones, proud ones, cruel ones. But none like this. the Federation would keep. Hunting her, her people might be gone. Her title meant nothing now. But in this cave, next to this human who didn't even know who she truly was, she felt something she had never known before. She felt safe. The Galactic Council met behind thick walls of crystal and steel. Whispers filled the chamber like cold wind. The princess had vanished without a trace, and her empire had fallen. But new rumors now traveled faster than light. Some said she died in the escape pod. Others believed she had been captured by enemies. But one report caught the attention of every High Lord. A surviving scout drone had picked up strange energy patterns from a forbidden sector, a Deathworld classified as uninhabitable. The signal was weak, but it matched Eltravan technology. Even worse, there was another signal nearby. A human life form. That changed everything. Humans were rare, dangerous, resilient, and if one had taken the princess, the balance of power would shift. High Lord Branther slammed his clawed fist on the table. No human should touch royal blood, he growled. His voice echoed through the dome. Others nodded, eyes wide with fear and pride. A human with access to Eltravan genetics was a threat none could allow. Back on the Deathworld, Nizara stood. At the edge of a frozen ridge. The wind howled through the rocks as her cloak whipped around her frame. She breathed in the air and tasted freedom, danger, and something else, something like peace. Jason stood beside her, checking the scanner again. He didn't say much. He rarely did. But when he pointed to the ridge below, Nizara followed without question. They moved like two shadows, quiet and steady. At the bottom of the ridge, an old cargo container lay half buried in snow and dust. Jason had found it weeks ago, but hadn't explored it yet. Might be salvage, he muttered. Nizara stepped forward and placed her hand on the door. It clicked open without resistance. Inside, they found crates of supplies, medical kits, rations, old weapon parts. Nizara's fingers brushed across the Eltravan emblem, burned into a storage unit. Her heart jumped. This wasn't just any cargo. It came from her own fleet. Jason turned to her, raising an eyebrow. Yours? He asked. She nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the faded crest. It was like finding a piece of her past buried in dust. It reminded her of who she had been, and who she might become again. As they carried the supplies back to the cave, Nizara felt a strange warmth in her chest. Jason didn't try to take control. He didn't ask for her power or her loyalty. He simply worked beside her, treating her like an equal. That night, as the fire crackled, she asked him something that had been bothering her. Why are humans feared? He looked up from his work and smiled faintly. Because we don't quit. Even when we lose everything, we keep going, he said. She let those words settle in her mind. They sounded simple, but they carried weight. Her people respected strength and bloodlines. But this man respected effort, survival, and choice. It made her question everything she had been taught. Far above them, the Council's elite forces launched a stealth fleet toward the Deathworld. Orders were clear: retrieve the princess or erase the threat. No witnesses, no records. A storm was coming, and the galaxy would not wait. But Nizara didn't feel fear anymore. Not with Jason nearby. She watched him as he reinforced the cave, prepared extra weapons, and checked every supply crate twice. He didn't panic. He didn't complain. He prepared. She found herself helping him with tasks she would never do before. Loading energy cells, cleaning old rifles, lifting metal plates. He never praised her like a master. He only nodded in quiet approval. It felt more real than any medal or speech. One evening, as they rested, Jason told her about Earth, about rain. That smelled like soil, about cities that never slept, about oceans that roared louder than warships. His voice was low, and his words were simple, but his stories painted pictures in her mind. She imagined that world, wild, unruly, full of humans, who had no royalty, but still fought like kings. She finally understood why the council feared them. It wasn't their weapons. It was their will. In the cave, she reached out and touched his hand. Just a moment. No words. He didn't pull away. He just looked into her eyes, as if he saw her, not the princess, not the warrior, just her. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she had to prove anything. Asterisk, the stars above the Deathworld were unusually quiet. Jason stared through his lens and noticed flickers in the sky. He clicked a button on his old scanner and frowned. Something was wrong. Movement, silent, fast, too clean for scavengers. He stepped back into the cave and found Nizara securing a power cell. "We've got incoming," he said flatly. She looked up sharply. Her fingers clenched around the metal case as the fire in her eyes returned. She didn't ask who. She already knew. The Federation had finally come. She could feel it in her bones. The same way a soldier senses the start of battle. But this time, she wasn't a princess hiding behind guards. She was ready to fight beside a man who had nothing to gain. Jason handed her a rifle. "Not fancy," he said, "but it shoots straight." She took it without a word and checked the charge. It was heavy, worn, human-made. Not elegant like her people's weapons, but solid, real, just like him. They didn't waste time. Within minutes, the cave was rigged. Motion traps, emergency exits, high ground markers. Nizara followed his lead but added her own tricks. She drew defense glyphs on the stone with glowing ink pulled from her tech plate. Together, they became something terrifying. A survivor and a warrior. A man who had lost everything and a woman who was learning what truly mattered. The Deathworld itself seemed to respect their fire. Even the wind held its breath. When the first dropship landed, its engines stirred the ground. Dust scattered. Lights blinked in patterns of war. Nizara stood in the shadow of the rocks, breathing slow, calm. Jason aimed from the ridge above. Eyes locked on movement. A squad of elite Federation soldiers stepped out in perfect formation. Their armor was black and gold. Their steps echoed across the cliff. These weren't scouts. They were assassins. Trained to kill quickly and without mercy. Jason spotted one aiming a scanner toward the cave. He clicked his rifle's trigger. A bolt of red light slammed into the soldier's chest, sending him tumbling backward. The rest dropped into defensive stances immediately. Nizara leaped from her position and fired down the slope. Her blasts were clean and precise. She moved like a shadow, dodging return fire with grace. Jason covered her from above, each shot protecting her flank. For a moment, it felt like they would hold. But more dropships came. Dozens of troops poured out, all trained for her capture. One called her name through a speaker, promising her safety. Nizara laughed bitterly and fired again. The words meant nothing. They never had. Safety had always been a leash in her life. But not anymore. She would not return as a prisoner to a world that cast her aside. Not when she had found something more valuable than a throne. Jason's position was spotted. Plasma bolts rained around him. He ducked behind the rocks, gripping his shoulder where heat had burned through his jacket. Nizara saw him fall and her blood roared with fury. She charged forward, ignoring the pain in her ribs, her cloak torn by fire. With a scream, she slammed into the soldiers like a storm. Her blade danced in her hands. Her eyes burned with the fire of her ancestors. Jason, wounded but still moving, crawled behind a crate and fired at the advancing squad. "You picked the wrong world," he muttered through clenched teeth. He wasn't fighting for glory. He was fighting for her. The two of them pushed back with everything they had. Metal clashed, fire screamed. And still, they stood. Back to back now, her blood dripping onto the soil. His sweat stinging his eyes. But neither stepped away, in the end. Silence returned. Bodies lay scattered across the cliffs. Smoke rose into the sky. Jason dropped to one knee, catching his breath. Nizara limped toward him, dropping her blade as she reached out a hand. He looked up at her, his face covered in dirt and blood. She smiled, just a little. "Still breathing," she whispered. He chuckled and took her hand. She pulled him too. His feet without effort. They had survived the first wave. But they both knew more would come. This was only the beginning. Still, as they stood together under the stars, something unshakable had formed between them, a bond sealed in fire. The smell of burned metal still hung in the air. Nazara limped slowly across the ridge, watching the horizon for signs of more ships. Her injuries stung, but her mind was sharper than ever. She knew this wasn't over. It was just a pause between storms. Jason crouched beside a wrecked Federation drone, pulling wires from its core. "They'll come back," he said. "Stronger next time." Nazara nodded and looked at the sky again. "Then we make sure we're stronger too," she replied. Inside the cave, Jason connected parts from the salvage drone to his old communication rig. He wasn't a trained engineer, but he knew how to make things work. Sparks flew. The device hummed. Static cracked through the room. Nazara's eyes widened as a familiar symbol blinked on the screen. It was an ancient crest, one she hadn't seen since childhood. "That's from the Elders' archives," she whispered. "It's a deep code, only used by blood-bonded clans." Jason stepped back, watching her fingers fly across the panel. "It's not a message," she said. "It's a beacon. Someone's calling. From the old side of the sector, from exile space." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Friend or enemy?" She met his eyes and answered, "Family." The signal was short but clear. It was a cry for help buried under layers of encryption. A hidden clan, long believed lost, was alive. And they had technology Nazara had only seen in legends. She turned to Jason. "If they're out there, we need to reach them." Jason didn't argue. He began packing supplies, tools, weapons, energy cores. He moved quickly, silently. Nazara noticed the way he worked, always one step ahead, always calm under pressure. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was a partner. The journey across the desert was brutal. The sun scorched the sand. The nights froze their breath. Jason never complained. Nazara held herself together with grit alone. She had fought battles in armor. This was a battle of will. They crossed broken valleys filled with bones of long-dead beasts. They avoided seismic traps hidden beneath cracked ground. And when a storm came that swallowed the skies, they found shelter in the wreckage of a fallen cargo ship. Inside the ship, Nazara opened a sealed door with her crest mark. Ancient lights flickered on. Walls whispered in her language. Jason stayed close, eyes scanning the shadows. "What is this place?" he asked. "A vault," she answered. From before the Great War, they found weapons powered by living energy, suits made from metal that responded to thought, crystals humming with unknown force. "We can't carry all this," Jason said. "We don't have to," Nazara replied. "We just need one thing to change everything." She reached into a locked chamber and pulled out a core the size of her palm. It glowed softly, pulsing like a heartbeat. "This," she said, "is the forged seed. With this, we can rebuild anything. Even worlds." Jason stared at the object. "And they let it sit here for centuries?" Nazara looked down. "They feared it. My people feared anything that wasn't under their control. That's why I was never accepted. I wasn't easy to control either." As they left the vault, a new signal appeared on Jason's scanner. It was different, sharp, fast, military. "They found us again," he said. Nazara didn't panic. "Let them come," she said. "This time we have more than fire. We have purpose." They set up their camp in an old Cums tower hidden in the rocks. Jason reinforced the entrances. Nazara activated a defense field powered by the forged seed. It covered the entire structure in a veil of light, invisible but deadly. That night, they didn't speak much. They sat beside the quiet hum of the shield, each lost in thought. But something had changed. They weren't just hiding anymore. They were preparing for something greater. Nizara looked at Jason. "You could have walked away from all this." She said, "Why didn't you?" Jason poked at the fire and answered, "Because no one else stood with you. And someone should have." She didn't respond right away. But her hand reached over and rested on his, gently. No force, no fear. He didn't pull away. In that moment, no titles mattered. No planets, no politics. Just one truth shared between two warriors. They would fight together. The signal from the lost clan led them deep into the bone cliffs of Sector 9. Nizara adjusted her wrist beacon as the readings grew stronger. The land around them shifted with each step, carved by storms and time. Even Jason, silent as usual, seemed more alert. Ahead, a black mountain rose like a jagged tooth. At its base, a narrow cave flickered with unnatural blue light. Jason raised his weapon, but Nizara placed her hand on his arm. "We're close," she said. "They're watching us now." They entered slowly, the path tightening around them. Lights pulsed through the walls like veins. Ancient symbols glowed faintly under their feet. Nizara touched one and whispered a phrase. The wall ahead slid open, revealing a wide chamber filled with eyes. Warriors in gleaming white armor stood motionless. Their weapons pointed down, but tension crackled in the air. At the center sat a woman with silver markings on her face and a gaze sharp enough to cut steel. She rose slowly, then bowed her head. "Nizara of the Storm Line," she said. "Daughter of the broken house, we feared you were dead." Nizara stepped forward and bowed deeply. "I nearly was. But this human kept me alive." Jason shifted uncomfortably as every eye turned toward him. He wasn't used to being the center of attention. One warrior stepped forward, his voice cold. "A male? From Earth? Why is he here?" Nizara looked him straight in the eye. "Because he stood when others fled." Murmurs filled the chamber. The silver-marked woman raised her hand and silence returned. "You bring the forged seed?" she asked. Nizara held it up. The chamber pulsed with soft light. "And you trust this outsider with its presence?" she asked again. Nizara didn't hesitate. "With my life." That answer shook the walls more than the forged seed did. Trust was rare among their kind. But to place it in a human, after all the fear and myths, was unthinkable. Yet none could deny the fire in Nizara's voice. Jason remained quiet. He didn't try to speak or explain himself. He stood still, letting actions speak louder than words. The warriors respected that more than he realized. One of them even gave a slight nod in approval. Later, in a private chamber, the clan elders questioned Nizara for hours. Jason sat alone outside, watching the blue sky through the cracks in the rock. He didn't know what they were planning. He only knew he had to be ready. Finally, Nizara returned. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with intensity. "They've agreed," she said. "They'll help us. But on one condition." Jason raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" She looked at him closely. "You have to prove yourself." Jason didn't flinch. "How?" he asked. She handed him a crystal blade and led him to an arena beneath the mountain. Warriors circled the stone ring. One stepped forward, tall and brutal, wearing the crest of the clan's defenders. "Win," she said simply. Jason entered the ring. Heart steady, the warrior charged. Steel clashed. Dust flew. Nizara watched from above, fists clenched. Jason moved differently from his opponent. He was slower, less polished, but smarter. He used the terrain. He used patience. Each strike was calculated. Each dodge was timed. When the warrior grew tired and charged blindly, Jason ducked and brought him to the ground with a move from Earth. "Combat drills," the crowd gasped. The warrior yielded. Jason stood over him but didn't raise his blade. He stepped back and offered his hand instead. The warrior took it. Silence turned into cheers. Nizara felt something deep in her chest shift. That night, the elders called Jason by a new title. Not guest, not outsider, but brother. He didn't smile, but Nizara did. It was small, quiet, but it reached her eyes. In the dark of that chamber, she whispered, "No male ever stood for me like this. No prince, no lord, only you." Jason didn't answer with words. He placed a hand over hers and nodded. They didn't need more than that. The bond had already been made, stronger than blood. The mountains shook before the sun rose. Dust rained from the ceiling of the exile fortress as alarms howled across the narrow stone halls. Jason grabbed his weapon before the lights even changed. Nizara was already at the command table, eyes locked on the scanners. A fleet was descending. Not a small squad like before. This time, the Federation had sent their full purge division. Dozens of cruisers, hundreds of dropships, armored beasts built for siege. The order was clear, no capture, only destruction. They knew we'd find the clan, Nizara said through clenched teeth. They waited for us to gather. Now they strike. Jason didn't blink. He tightened the strap on his armor and looked toward the sky. Then we strike harder. Inside the mountain, the exiled clan moved quickly. Weapons were powered. Shields were raised. Old war machines, long kept in storage, roared back to life. Nizara gave orders not like a princess, but like a commander. Jason stayed at her side, guiding defense points with calm precision. He had never led an alien army, but war was war. He understood tactics. He understood survival. And now he understood something deeper, why she had never fit in with the royalty she came from. She was never meant to rule from a throne. She was meant to stand in fire. The Federation descended like a swarm. Gunfire lit the skies. Energy beams scorched the cliffs. Ground troops dropped in waves, but the mountain held. Not because it was made of stone, but because the hearts inside it had turned unbreakable. Jason fought beside the warriors he once feared. His blade burned with blue light, a gift from the elders. His rifle cracked with each shot. Every time he fell back, he covered someone else. Every time someone fell, he pulled them to their feet. Nizara's presence burned across the battlefield. Her commands were sharp. Her strikes were lethal. She fought not for pride, but for the chance to build something better. And when the lines wavered, her voice reminded them who they were. Not forgotten, she shouted. Not broken, not alone. Her voice echoed through the stone, cutting through fear and fire. Even the enemy paused at the sound of it. Even machines slowed when she screamed her truth. Jason reached the ridge and saw a new threat approaching. A Federation dreadnought, twice the size of any vessel they'd faced. Its core cannon charged with red lightning. If it fired, the mountain would fall. He opened a cum and called to Nizara. "I'm going in," she responded instantly. "You won't make it alone." Jason looked toward the clan below and saw her already moving toward him. "You're not alone either," she added. They boarded a stolen interceptor and launched into the sky. The air burned around them as the dreadnought loomed like a monster. Jason flew with steady hands. Nizara prepared the core lance. One strike. One chance. They weaved through blasts and debris. Shields flickered. The cockpit cracked. Still they flew forward. Jason guided the ship close to the dreadnought's core. Nizara stood behind him, waiting for the signal. "Now," he said. She fired. The lance tore through steel and energy. The core ruptured with a thunderous light. Flames exploded outward. Jason pulled the ship away, hands bleeding. Nizara screamed as the shockwave threw them into a violent spin. They crashed near the base of the mountain. Smoke filled the air. Jason crawled from the wreckage, dragging Nizara out with him. She coughed, eyes blinking, blood on her brow. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. Above them, the dreadnought broke apart and fell from the sky. The Federation forces scattered. The tide had turned, not from size, not from power, but from two souls who refused to bow. The warriors cheered across the cliffs. The mountain rang with voices. Jason sat beside Nazara, wrapping a bandage around her arm. She looked at him with something more than thanks, something stronger. "What do you want now?" she asked gently. Jason thought for a moment, then smiled. "Just to build something that lasts." Nazara took his hand and held it tight. "Then let's build it together." And the stars above them seemed to burn brighter. Weeks passed since the fall of the Federation dreadnought. Smoke cleared from the skies, and silence slowly replaced gunfire. The Exile clan, once hidden and broken, now stood openly among the ruins, rebuilding with steady hands and stronger hearts. Nazara stood at the highest ridge, overlooking the valley below. Where once there was only rock and dust, new structures rose from the ground. Metal towers blended with the cliffs. Shield domes shimmered in the air. What began as survival had become something more. Jason worked beside the builders. He carried stone, fixed power cells, trained young warriors in tactics. He didn't lead from above. He led from beside them. Every task, every word, every scar he shared made the people respect him without question. Nazara joined him in the field every day. Gone were the royal robes and polished armor. She wore light battle gear and carried tools like everyone else. Her voice was no longer a command from a throne. It was a promise shared shoulder to shoulder. The Council of Elders called a gathering. Under the old mountain, warriors, builders, and scouts assembled. Lights flickered across the chamber as the council stood before the people. The silver-marked woman raised her staff and spoke loud and clear. "The Federation has been pushed back, their armada scattered, their command shaken. But this is not an end. This is a beginning." And it began with two who defied what they were told to be. She turned to Nazara and Jason. "You brought light into exile. You restored honor with action, not birthright. And you proved that strength is not in blood, but in bond." Then she bowed deeply, and the entire clan followed. Jason shifted uncomfortably, but nodded in respect. Nazara stepped forward, speaking not as a princess, but as someone reborn. "We are not many," she said, "but we are enough. We've shown them that no world is too small, no outcast too weak, no human too strange." The crowd roared in approval. For the first time in her life, Nazara felt what real leadership meant. Not fear, not power, trust. She glanced at Jason, and he gave her a look that said more than words ever could. Later that evening, as stars lit the sky, Jason and Nazara sat by a new fire outside the rebuilt cave. The land around them hummed with quiet life. He passed her a cup of broth, just like he had the first night they met. She smiled softly and took it. "Do you remember what you said back then?" Jason nodded. "You needed help. That was enough." She leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "It still is." In the days that followed, messages from scattered colonies began to arrive. Small resistances, broken outposts, hidden families, all asking if what they heard was true, that a human had stood for an alien, and the stars had changed because of it. Jason read those messages one by one, then simply nodded and got back to work. He didn't chase glory. He didn't write speeches. He planted seeds, taught defense, shared stories. He became a symbol by refusing to act like one. Nazara took command of the new alliance that formed around them, not an empire, not a rebellion, a union built by trust and defended by courage. And beside her, always, was the one who had no title but had given her everything. Years passed. Children grew hearing stories of the warrior who had been rejected by all males in the galaxy, only to be honored by one from Earth. They listened with wide eyes as tales were told of how she rose from the ashes and built something no throne ever could. And they learned of the man who never asked for her hand, but always held it when it mattered. A human who showed the stars why Earth breeds different.